Hi, friends. I am so glad to have you with us today. I'm really excited to introduce you to my friend Betsy. I met Betsy quite a few years ago. She has actually been in Texas, so she's one of the only people that have actually gotten to meet in person and do some ministry with in person. But I am excited to have her share with you some of the spaces that God has called her to use art ministry. As you know, and we've talked about, art ministry has looked like so many different things in various contexts all over the world, even. But there's some really specific places that she has been able to use art ministry, use the creative arts. She's an artist and a creative herself, and so we're gonna talk about that in just a little bit. But Betsy, will you tell us just a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? And just she was a creative.
Okay, hi. My name is Betsy Campbell. I was born and raised in Massachusetts, and I spent most of my adult life in New Hampshire until I moved to Texas 5 years ago. So that was a really big relocation. And it's funny, I think that there's not many people from New Hampshire or New England in general that come down here, because even though San Antonio is a military city with lots and lots of people from all over, when people say, "Oh, where are you from?" and I say New Hampshire, they always go, "Oh, wow." So yes, from the Northeast to Texas, we've been here 5 years. It is this summer. And I have, let me see, I moved here and I was lonely. We still had not found a church. And I heard, I was looking up different things online and came across Ashley and Created. And I was like, this sounds amazing. And she had the retreat coming up, and I had never even sat in an art ministry session before, but I just liked the sound of it. And I wanted to connect, and I prayed and felt like the Holy Spirit said, "You need to go." So I came to the first art ministry retreat to learn how to do this. I was at the time trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Sorry, I'm going to wipe my eyes a lot. Allergies. And I was trying to learn to paint. I have since then changed my direction, and I am now trying to become a surface pattern designer. So during the pandemic, I learned how to use Adobe Illustrator, used my downtime well, I guess, and I'm trying to finish up my second collection of patterns now, which I hope to license to wallpaper and fabric companies. And yeah, I love the art ministry model that Ashley had. When I prayed about what I needed to do with it, it took a while, but over and over again, the Holy Spirit definitely said, you need to make this a part of your business, not a separate entity that is a not-for-profit, which I kept going back and going, "Are you sure about that?" And I found some kingdom-driven business podcasts and started realizing that there are a lot of really unique creative things people do that is basically like ministry, or I call it businessry, that is a part of their business. And so I came up with a separate name so that I have a separate social media page for when I do art ministry things. But it is not technically a separate entity from my business. I just have it on there because it's going to attract a different crowd, or different people might follow that and that are not interested in my surface pattern design. So so it's called Create in Me. Because I wanted to come up with a name that kind of got across in the name that it's not for people who are like skilled artists. It's more about what you allow God to do in you than it is about what you put on the canvas or the paper or whatever you do.
I love that. And so one of the things I know, yeah, you and I have talked about at different times, is you have an entrepreneurial heart. You always have. Like, God has made your mind to think in this like beautiful business arena, and not everybody is like that. And so one of the spaces I know that you have even wrestled with, not even a hard wrestle, just I want to start a business. And for some people, saying the word ministry even sounds like there's not money attached, or how do I do this? Is this nonprofit? It's just kind of this gray space a little bit.
Yeah.
So can you tell me just a little bit about that wrestle with it? And it could just be very raw. that wrestle between the business ministry. What is this? What did that wrestle space look like for you?
So for me, I I mean, I know that with God all things are possible. And so it was like, well, I must not be the only person who has an idea about this, and yet I have no model in front of me to follow. Like, what does that practically look like? Because I know that there is in the church, it's becoming less and less, but the idea that to serve God, you have to serve God in church or in a not-for-profit, that your work, you dedicate your work to the Lord, you give your money from your work to the Lord, but that the work itself is just your job. And so I started looking for different resources, and I found this one particular one called Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. They have a podcast, they have a book, and they taught, and I was like, this is really interesting. If you think about when a business does something great or changes the way business is done, think about like the difference between when you used to have to drive to Blockbuster to get a video to watch at home versus Netflix came on the scene and changed an entire marketplace. So right. Yeah. If they have the ability to change an entire marketplace, an entire market, with this one idea, what can Christians do, and how does God want to use Christians and the ideas that he gives us to affect the marketplace? Because just like God has a will for my family or my children's school, he has a will for different markets and different products to achieve certain things, and anything can be a tool in his hand. So why couldn't a business be a tool in his hand as well? Like, I think that we're on two different ends of the same spectrum, where business people have trouble with the spiritual thinking about their business, but they're creative. They just don't hesitate to implement. They'd rather make mistakes along the way, versus creative people who don't have a problem with being spiritual about what we're doing. We have a problem with the task-oriented side, but we're just two opposite ends of the same spectrum. And I was like, I am not that different than these people. And that was a big revelation.
I think that you see those spaces where the bridges that need to happen. I think that is a gift that God has given you, that you can see spaces where two people can play, and basically to just see other perspectives. I also think, and this is really beautiful about you, I don't know if you like see this in yourself, but I love that you're okay with ideas. And that seems so simple and basic, but not everyone is okay with just, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this idea. And it doesn't have to be even the thing that sticks. So how do you feel like when you have these new ideas? I just want to pick your brain for a minute, because I feel like there's somebody else that's probably wrestling with this idea of, what do you do when this idea that you have doesn't stick, and letting go of it and trying something new?
I think of ideas as maybe being on like a path where you had to learn something from the successes and failures of that first idea to be able to go, oh, now I know what I need to do next. And I think that very often people want things to be perfect the first time. And I think that it is kind of an evolution or a spiritual growth process to be able to realize. For example, I was terrified to put my business website up, and I was like, oh, what if it's not perfect? What if and it's like, you know what? No one's going to care, because no one's going to see it at first anyway. It's okay. Right. You mess it up and you have to go back and fix it. And you have to like, oops, I messed that up, because it's a journey. And journey is a big theme with me in everything I do creatively, that it's part of a journey. As a matter of fact, that was the theme of the session that I did with the pastors was journey.
I want to pause for a second, because one of the spaces where you have seen God show you, hey, let's try this out, and then you're kind of listening and waiting to see how it goes, has actually been in a community of faith, and with some pastors. And so will you tell us a little bit about what that part of your journey was like? Trying something out, so to speak.
Yes. I used to get very frustrated with like lack of communication, lack of response, how I was responded to. Um, and I've come to understand now that has nothing to do with me. That's just the Lord saying no, or not this time, or not this way. And so when I came, we finally did settle on a church down here. And I was trying to think, okay, I'd gone through art ministry and I was like, how do I go about doing this with them? And so the first thing that I did was just try to have a conversation with the head pastor about, this is what I learned how to do. Do you see this having a space here? And he seemed like he was having a hard time grasping what it was, which is what I think that we all run into, because it doesn't look like anything that people have seen before. And even putting art in the name art ministry, people's response is always, well, I'm not artistic, or I'm not creative, or I'm not good at that. And so I've had to come up with a way to respond to that, because I think that to understand it, they have to actually do it to understand what it is and experience the value in the experience for themselves. And yeah, that's what I had basically figured out.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that so many times, if you have done art ministry, and we're saying art ministry, but you might not be calling it art ministry. It's just the idea of using the creative arts to help people to connect to God, figure out what's going on inside. And so many times when I've even said the word art ministry, yes, that same response of, I'm sorry, what? And if there's not already a place for it and a construct that's been built in their minds, it just kind of, goes away. And the best way to get people to understand is to have people participate. So how did you overcome that hurdle and getting people to actually participate for the first time?
Well, so we actually are right in Pastor Appreciation Month. And now in past years, at my other churches, I would typically serve them a big meal. And I thought, if I present it to them as, I would like to give this as a gift to you because you give to everyone else all the time. You're always trying to help other people hear from the Lord. Who helps you hear from the Lord? And so I said, would you be okay if I did this as a gift to you? You don't pay anything. I'm just gonna lead you in a time where you can receive from the Lord. Would you be okay with that? And they were like, that would be great.
So let me ask you a question specifically about that. I love the idea of offering something as a gift, because I think that does kind of help people's walls and their barriers come down, rather than even maybe come join me for this, or this is something that you need, but it is a gift that we've been given. Can I share this with you? And really that's what you're doing. And I think it's such a brilliant way of kind of tiptoeing in the door, gently knocking and saying, I mean, who doesn't want a gift? When someone shows up at your door with a gift, you're like, okay, well, thank you. So somebody received that gift and it was brought in and they said, yes, we want you to come and do this. They were open to it. How did that go? Because sometimes it works. Sadly, sometimes working with church staff or just churches in general, they're not always the most open. They can be. How did that go?
It went really well. It went amazing, actually. And I ended up finding out even years later, there was things that were still coming out of that session. So I prayed, not that there's anything wrong with just following the book and the exercises that you have come up with, but I was like, I really want to just hear from the Holy Spirit what it is that I needed to do. And I got this really specific exercise. So the session was called Journey. It was very interesting. So specifics that were great about that was that, first of all, they were all confused about the reset and the fact that you're going to be writing things down, but you're not trying to solve any problems. You're not trying to and when I said you can either tear those up or you can cross things out, whatever feels most therapeutic to you. The lead pastor, he said, is it okay if I just keep this? Because I was actually really surprised about some of the things that came out when I made this list. And I want to remember them because I want to pray about it or address it later. And I said, that is great. If that's what's meaningful to you, then that's what you needed to do. I said, and just as a aside, this is a great exercise for you to keep in your tool bag when you need to write a sermon. If you feel stuck or you just need to clear your mind really thoroughly, this is a tool that you can use anytime. It doesn't have to be connected to our ministry. And he was like, oh, okay. So even if he just got that out of it, that was already great.
I'm going to pause for a second because I think what you did was beautifully offer a tool, but you also made a connection for him between the process. And I don't even want to say art because it's really just the creative process. It could be writing, it could be dancing, whatever, of seeing how this can be used in our everyday lives. It doesn't have to just be a session. And so I'm so glad that you made that connection for him. That was, I'm sure, really important.
The other thing that happened that was great, excuse me. So one of the other pastors, female pastor, she seemed very heavy. She didn't talk much, and she's usually very smiley, outgoing, high energy person. And she was very kind of sullen, and I didn't know what was going on. I just kind of tried to respect her space and encourage her gently. And I could just tell that she was dealing with something. And I had an idea what it was just from what she was creating, but I did not discuss it with her. And then, I don't know, was it like a year later, maybe even two, she was doing the announcements for an upcoming group open session that I was hosting. And, excuse me. And she out of nowhere starts sharing about everything that was going on with her and what happened with her when she was at that session earlier. And so apparently she had had a miscarriage just a week or two before, like I think about 2 weeks before that session. And she starts talking to the whole congregation about, basically, I want to educate you about the fact that pastors struggle spiritually too. And I had not dealt with it. I was in denial. I did not want to face the pain and the grief. I was angry at God, and she admitted that she was angry at God, which you don't hear pastors admit very often. And she's like, and I did not want to go into that art ministry session because I knew that I was going to be confronted with it. And that is what she was dealing with in the session. And the Lord started speaking to her, started ministering to her. And she's like praising me. She's like, that woman has a gift. And she's going on and on about how I gently led her through it, and that she went home and finished the process of, discussing everything with the Lord. But I had no idea what I would have walked away going, geez, I don't know what I think I would have not have had any kind of conclusive proof that it had been effective with her. And I think that can be the part that's hard as well.
One of the things that I feel like people really wrestle with sometimes, I'm going to even be specific to art ministry, is that discouragement. Specifically the discouragement when either something doesn't go the way you wanted to, you're trying to explain it to somebody and they're like, no, we don't want you to do that. And I feel like you have had this really beautiful perspective of not to be incredibly discouraged by the no's, but also seeing how God can use those no's as actually an answer.
Yes. So there's a movie title that comes to mind in describing that. And it's not even a movie that I had seen, but I just really liked the phrase. It was called The Larger Yes, or The Bigger Yes. And it was a story about when God doesn't allow you something. The story was about somebody who was a Christian that died, but then, at their funeral, tons of people came to the Lord. So it was kind of like sometimes you have a disappointing thing that happens, but then it's the seed for something larger to happen later. And I have found that personally. So I had that great session with the pastors, and then I had a great session with the youth. And when I talked to that same female pastor, I said, so let's do something with the boys down the road, even if it's in a couple of months. And for some strange reason, she didn't want me to do that. And she didn't really say why, other than maybe she didn't think that the guys would be as open to getting into like a really emotionally vulnerable place, which I think is often what happens is people think like, I just don't know that people are going to be open to embrace this. And so she kind of pawned me off on the Royal Rangers head, because we have Royal Rangers, which is, if you don't know, it's like a Christian version of Boy Scouts kind of, and they do talk about the Bible, and they've like merits instead of badges and whatnot. And so when I talked to him, I tried to describe to him, because he had not seen what happened with the youth, and he had not been in the pastoral session. So he did not understand the impact of it personally for himself. And I think that's where it gets really hard. And so he's trying to fit it into, well, we have an art merit badge that maybe you could do that and it would fit that merit, because everything that they do has to fit into this program. And it didn't 100% fit into the program. And so he's like, I'm going to look into that and get back to you. And, I talked to him about once a month. And after the second or third time, it was like, okay, I'm kind of getting the runaround here. And so
can we just say
art
ministry rarely fits into the program? Could be a
rarely. Nobody gets it until you've actually done it. So for me, I hear from the Lord about yes, no, or another time when I pray, but then I'll go to interact with pastoral staff or heads of ministries, and they will respond in a way that not out and out rude, but it's kind of like either avoidant, or they say they're going to email you and they don't, or usually it tends to be communication issues that come across as inconsiderate, as opposed to being anything that's out and out rude. Or they just are closed off, or, like, I don't remember us talking about that. Yes, we did, kind of a thing.
And you've learned to recognize those things as not just, yes, it could be actually rude, but you've also begun to recognize those things as possibly God saying, oh, this is not it, rather than just being
this is a closed door.
So I want to give you a chance just to spend a moment encouraging, or just speaking to, even if there is specifically someone that has this desire to somehow use the arts creatively in their communities, in their community of faith, in their whatever context, but they're feeling discouraged. How would you encourage somebody right now that's going, it's not that I don't want to, I just feel discouraged, like there's no doors open, nothing's coming at me. What would you say to them when it just feels like all the doors are closed?
Okay, so direct tie-in, the other story that I was actually the one that I was going to tell, but didn't come to mind right then, was that the Royal Rangers he was 3, 4, 5 months later, was running the regional leadership conference. And he invited me to do an art ministry session for the wives of the leaders who were sitting in training. And somebody in that had a really significant breakthrough, where they heard just loads and loads of information, like detailed instructions about things they need to change and do in their life. And that is not something that I would have ever thought to say, oh, there's a Royal Rangers conference. Hey, let me offer to do art ministry session there. And so I think that if it seems like you're getting closed doors where you're looking, pull back and ask the Holy Spirit to show you, am I looking in the wrong place? Should I be looking somewhere else? And I think that a very interesting question that I have learned to ask is, should I be asking a different question? Because very often we are asking and praying about things in a very yes or no fashion with the Holy Spirit, and saying, should I do this or should I not? Should I go here or should I not? And I think that very often it's so much more subtle and gray and kind of interwoven. And it might be that you're supposed to I don't know, grocery shopping at a different store to connect with an old friend, or do something else different in your life that's going to lead you to another place. It might be at a business. It might be at an event. It might be online. It might be, it could be, sometimes I find that if you're getting like a partial response, it's because you've got part of the formula right, but you're missing something. Maybe you're supposed to do colored pencils and paper and not do paint. And maybe you're only asking places that don't want paint in their facility. And so it could be it could be that you need to do sessions with your own family at home, or some friend that needs you, and that's the capacity that you need to start in, and that down the road that will lead into larger groups. So I would say to stay away from blanket yes or no things when you're praying, and really get into the details. And yeah, and you can do your own art ministry session to hear from the Lord about what you need to do, and ask him to make the vision for where you are going really, really specific.
Jesus was phenomenal at asking questions. We know he's the best at asking questions. And so we learn from the best. That I love that you mentioned, asking, it's not necessarily about the right questions, but just we're not only trying to help other people learn to ask questions, but are we asking the right questions and not just yes or no? So that's so good. And I think that really is encouraging, just a reminder to just keep asking questions. So Betsy, I am so thankful for you, and I'm thankful for what God is doing and continuing to do in spaces of transition, and looking forward, looking back. And I no doubt in my mind, the next time I talk to you, you will be coming up with some new ideas and seeing where God has you. And so thank you so much for just sharing part of your story today with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a joy.
Yes, awesome. Well, we will definitely hear from you again. Thanks for joining us for another session of Blank Canvases and stories of people being called into art ministry all around the world. Blessings, and we hope you join us again. Don't forget to check out createdministry.com for resources, tips, and ways that you can be trained in art ministry as well.